Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. I hope that you're all excited for a really good night. We're so delighted this evening to be able to welcome a genuine international music superstar to LSF. Harry the piano. We've had an amazing afternoon of workshops already, and I'm so excited for this concert. I genuinely can't tell you how excited I am. The fact that we're able to welcome Harry is all down to our new partnership with Coach House Pianos. This partnership has ensured for us a firm future with quality pianos and with a fleet of really diverse pianos that's going to last us for many, many decades into the future. We've been working really closely with the wonderful David Halford, that you can see here, who's our advisor from Coach House Pianos, and we've been working with him for about 2 years to actually get the package right and to work out exactly what's going to work best for LSF. I'm really thrilled to have you here as well this evening, David, and so therefore I'd like to hand over to you. David's going to say a little bit more and also to welcome Harry. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nikki, and it's a great pleasure to be here. It's also a great pleasure for myself and for Coach House to be working with Loughborough Schools Foundation. As Nikki said, we've been negotiating, talking, planning piano things for the last couple of years, and it has been an absolute joy to do that and a pleasure to work with the schools. We've started this partnership. We actually started it properly back in June earlier this year when we welcomed, I think, about a dozen pianists, I think it was, to our showroom in London for a masterclass. I don't know if any of the students are here. I think some of you, I recognise some faces, yeah. That was a lovely event, and that'll be an annual event. So I think we have a date in the diary already for the next one, next June. And if any of you can come down to London, it'd be more lovely to welcome you there in our showroom. One of the things about Coach House, and one of the best things about Coach House for me, is that it's a family business, and we're actually celebrating 40 years since the company was founded this year. But something that when you buy a piano as an individual, or if you're a school that invests in a piano or a fleet of pianos like Loughborough has, is that you become part of the Coach House family. And so I'm very excited to sort of look forward to events like this over the next however many years. So you'll see a lot of me, hopefully, and I hope to see a lot of you too. It would be totally remiss of me not to do a little sales pitch, as that's what I do for a living. I sell pianos. So one of the things about being a member of the Coach House family, and especially as a school client, and you as students, families of students, members of the school community, staff, is that you can all benefit from exactly the same benefits that the school gets, and that means prices of pianos, and from next week actually, leasing pianos. So not finance, but finance lease, where you will own the piano at the end of a specific term, whether that's 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. This isn't normally something that is available to individuals or private retail buyers, but as members of the school community who have gone down this route, this is all open to all of you as well. So there'll be more details coming actually out next week about that scheme that the school will hopefully share with you all. So look out for that one. So you don't want to listen to me going on, you want to hear Harry. So let me just give you a little bit of an introduction for him. Harry has toured and performed, recorded with just about everybody in the world of show business, from David Bowie and Rod Stewart to Dame Julie Andrews and Andrea Bocelli. In 2019, he was asked to perform at a private audience for Her Late Majesty the Queen, and more recently for His Majesty the King at Buckingham Palace. He has been musical director on a variety of primetime BBC shows for 10 years, and his YouTube channel now has over 3 million followers. It is my great pleasure, on behalf of Coach House and Loughborough Schools Foundation, to introduce and present Harry the piano.
Well, thank you, Dave, for those incredibly kind and yet, of course, thoroughly deserved words of introduction. How are we doing this evening, folks? Are we well? Sorry, while I was stood just behind the doorway there while Dave was delivering the eulogy and looking out at you, and actually this sounds a bit of a cheesy thing to start the evening with, but just looking out thinking like, what a joy tonight actually to play to an audience of such youth and beauty, I have to say, which does, I know, sound very cheesy, but you have to put that against the context that my engagement last week was working on a cruise ship. So the very fact that many of you have your own hips and are still awake at this time is something of a treat for me. Anyway, Harry the Piano, what's all that about? Forgive me, I know it sounds like a sort of hugely self-aggrandising stage name. It was actually given to me by an interviewer, who I just was being sort of interviewed on a show, and said, what would you like to be known as? I said, oh, just call me Harry, it's fine. And he looked at me and said, well, you're not Sting or Madonna, are you? You've got to give you a second name. And I said, oh, honestly, just Harry will be fine. And as we went on, he said, please welcome Harry the Piano, just completely off the top of his head, and it's stuck ever since from about 20 years ago. So forgive me that. But what to expect? Well, I'll make a bold claim at the start of the show to say I'm going to try and do something this evening in every style known to man on the piano. So hopefully something for all of your tastes out there. And indeed, if there isn't, we will be coming to you for some requests later on. So just to catch those of you that have been bored hitherto, if you see what I mean. And the way I always like to start is doing something that I struggle to introduce to you, because I like to simply sit at the piano and play whatever comes into my head. So I don't have much more of an idea what you're about to hear for the next 5 minutes than you do. Hope you enjoy it. Hope I enjoy it, come to that. And I would ask you, in all seriousness, just to do one thing for me at the start of this evening. Just pray God that something occurs to me. Thank you very much. Can you pray a bit harder? All right, let's try this. Thank you very much. Would it be fair to say that at least some of you, that's right, some of you recognised at least some of those tunes? A few nods around the place, unconvinced from others. So the baby was singing from the same hymn sheet, which is always a great start, isn't it? I'm going to carry on from that rather noisy opening into introducing you to a couple of my musical heroes. The first of which I met in quite extraordinary circumstances. They say never meet your heroes, don't they? But I'm glad to relate this is a happy story. Otherwise, I guess I wouldn't be telling it in a show, would I? He was awful. No. The second I wish I'd met, but was sadly departed long before I arrived. The first one came about because in quite an early stage in my career, I got a very lucky break and was spotted by somebody in the club where I was playing. Asked me to come and play the piano, initially just once a week, and then after sort of a few years, it branched out into running the band on the show. On a rather anarchic early morning show in the 1990s called The Big Breakfast. I think one or two of my vintage and just below might remember. And this was in the days when there were only 4 channels on TV. You know, incredible to those of you in the front row. Imagine only having 4 channels on your TV. That's it's almost unthinkable in the days of cable, isn't it? But so it was a much bigger deal, and consequently, because of that, we managed to attract sort of quite big stars. Everybody on that circuit that you're used to seeing on the old Michael Parkinson show, or more latterly on the Graham Norton show. Anybody who has anything to promote, films, books, songs, would come and be interviewed on the show. Except it was 7 a.m. and it was live, so it always had a slightly vibe about it, as something could kick off. Anyway, the thing that was really most shocking to me of all was discovering that there are actually 2 5 o'clocks in a day. Who knew that? And I had to get up at the first one to be on this show. And the stars were coming so thick and fast when I was doing 5 days a week there that you almost become blasé about these big names, where usually, of course, you'd be absolutely on tenterhooks. But I got a call one night with a rather cryptic question. Do you know the song Life on Mars? Yes. Can you play it? Yes, I think so. Why? So it's because we've got David Bowie coming on the show tomorrow. And he's the first interview. We're going to be start about 7:05. And he almost certainly won't want to sing at 7:10 in the morning at the end of the interview, one would assume. But just in case, you know, he's a sport, are you up for it? Would you accompany him? And yeah, sure. I was thinking this is never going to happen. You know, he's not going to be who wants to sing at 7:10 in the morning on live TV? Not many. Anyway, so he came on. Of course, we had a lot of stars, but David Bowie is David Bowie. There's a certain atmosphere in the house when you've got a star of that magnitude there. And he did the interview. He's very cheery, he's very polite to everyone, seemed like a very nice guy. I think this is great. And then about 7:10, the interviewer, Johnny Board, said to him, so before we go to the ads, David, you give a few bars of something? Fancy having a little sing? And we were expecting the big head shaking. Oh, I'm so sorry, I had a voice this morning. And he went, yeah, sure. And Johnny just pointed at me and said, take it away, Harry. And at 7:11 in the morning, I found myself playing Life on Mars for 40 seconds with David Bowie. Can you imagine? That's pretty mad, isn't it? And he was the nicest chap, and it went well, and it was fantastic. It's one of my great treasured musical memories, and thankfully there's a photograph of it, or nobody would believe me, I think. This is in the days before everything got put on the internet. But the best part at the end of that story is usually when stars came and had their interviews, they would then leave the building, go off into their limos and off back to their glamorous lives. But we came back from the advert break, and he was still in the room. So, of course, our presenter said, still with us, David Bowie, ladies and gentlemen. Round of applause from all the crew and everybody. And he put his hand up and he said, you see that bloke over there, who was our sound engineer called Sonny, who had one of those long microphones on a stick with a big furry thing on the top, you know those things I'm talking about? He said, it's always intrigued me that, because it's more difficult than it looks, isn't it? And Johnny said to him, oh, please don't praise him, it's going to go to his head, we'll never hear the last of it. He said, no, but I always wanted to have a go, because you've got to make sure you're close enough to record the person talking, but if you dip down and it comes into the shot of the camera, that's a big no-no, you've got to keep it out of shot. So he's got, can I have a go? So guess what he said? Yes, of course. So he picked it up, and we were all laughing. We've got this global superstar doing the sound for our little show. And here's the funny bit. He kept on doing it. He did the show, the sound, for the entire rest of the show. He was like sounding there. To the point where it just got so normal that David Bowie was your sound man, that when we were moving from room to room, the producer was saying, come on, David, quickly, we've only got 30 seconds. Sorry. I mean, insane, you know, but with such good humour and such... And then at the end of the show, he stayed. We all had breakfast afterwards in an adjacent place, and he stayed and had breakfast with us. And he was just so lovely. So it was such a nice meeting of music. He was a huge musical hero of mine. Anyway, that was a rather long preamble to the next piece, which is my first introduction to a hero musically. Just going to give you a little medley, a little tribute of mine to a few David. Do we have any fans of David Bowie in the house tonight? 2. Okay, well, I thought 5. It's great. This is a very British audience. When you say that to Americans, yeah, sure, yeah. Okay, so this is my tribute to David Bowie. I hope you like it. indeed. My first of the two heroes I'm introducing you to. The next, my introduction to this, posthumous introduction obviously, to this next hero of mine came because I told my students this afternoon, the ones that I was lucky enough to have a wonderful couple of workshops with, and I think they can barely comprehend when I say something like this, but my father was a vicar, so we grew up in a house without television. But we saw no TV at all through the childhood and only had classical music on in the background, so a very sort of strict, closeted environment to grow up in. And eventually, after a months-long campaign by my sister and I, once we reached about 14, 15, really laying this on with the trowel, saying, we're the only house in Europe, Mum and Dad, without a television nowadays. And even our teachers are telling us to watch certain programmes for our homework, so you're impeding our education. Laying up on a little thing. Eventually they relented and bought us a small black and white TV. Oh, the happy days. It was a big moment in our house. One of the first things I saw on this TV was a late night, Saturday night BBC music show. And it was a brilliant Canadian jazz pianist called Oscar Peterson on there. One or two of you might be familiar with him. Absolutely incredible, seminal pianist. And he was playing a song by a writer who, from the moment I heard this tune up to today, I can say, unqualified, my favourite of all of them. Now, this writer I'm talking about, he was described as having one foot in Tin Pan Alley and the other in Carnegie Hall. That's to say, one foot in the kind of American jazz scene of the 1920s and 30s, and the other in the very upscale sort of New York classical scene. So amongst our wonderful audience, clearly riddled with sophistication this evening. You don't seem very sure about that. Anybody like to hazard a guess as to who I'm talking about? There's only really one person who fits that description. George Gershwin. I'm so glad that I am playing to this audience and get that confident and correct answer back. Simply because I once did a show at the Adelaide Festival in Australia, and I asked that same question in a theatre, say, who do you think this is, folks? One foot in Tin Pan Alley, the other in Carnegie Hall. There was silence for about 10 seconds, and an Aussie voice came out of the darkness and said, I don't know, mate, but he must have had bloody long legs. Which is why I love playing in Australia. Gershwin, everybody knows the name, and everybody, you know what a genius he was in so many ways, but just the extent of his success when you actually look at his track record, it is unbelievable. He was writing show after show after show after show, with 12, 13, 14 absolute bangers in, songs that have been still around today. Incredible. Everything he touched was turned into gold, sort of theatrically wise. And in the middle, at the peak of that success, he did something a little bit odd. He wrote a piece for jazz band and orchestra, Rhapsody in Blue. Then he wrote a couple of piano concertos. Then he wrote an opera, for goodness sake, Porgy and Bess. I mean, jazz writers didn't really do this kind of thing, especially back then. And he was hanging out in New York playing tennis. Listen to this for a foursome with Ravel, Shostakovich and Stravinsky. What are you paid to watch that as a tennis foursome? As I say, everything was fated everywhere, everything turned to gold. And of course, on that very sort of upscale New York party circuit, he was absolutely always guest of honour, and he was always being invited to places. And there's always been, descended on these parties, hundreds of young aspiring actresses who were desperate for a part in one of these shows, heard that George Gershwin was going to be there. There was always a piano at these parties. He always made a beeline for it, sat down, started showing off. Imagine that, showing off a piano. And his friends that he would take with him, he used to go along hoping to sort of, get to know some of these young actresses. They never got a look in, because the second George started playing, they would all gather around the piano, cooing with, And one day he had one particularly grumpy friend called Oscar Levant, who was really got the hump with him. He was always sort of the centre of attention. And one night George was playing, and this bevy of young, beautiful women were around, and one of them, rather gushing young lady, said to Oscar Levant, this very sort of grumpy friend of George's, said, do you suppose these songs will still be being played in 100 years' time? To which Oscar rather sourly replied, sure, if George is around to play them. That was in 1925. In fact, it was in the summer of 1925, so almost 100 years to the day that question was asked and answered. And I have a feeling that amongst all the ages here, there will be many who will recognise at least one or two of these songs. This is my tribute to the incomparable genius of my favourite writer, George Gershwin. Hope you like it. Well, do you recognise any of those folks? Yeah. The best thing about playing that medley is you're kind of duty bound to start and finish with Rhapsody in Blues. It's kind of his signature tune, you know. But in the middle, there's about 300 choices, and they're all brilliant. So quite often I swap things around, and they're all such a joy to play. So my favourite writer. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. We're going to move to something, the real purpose here of my visit today. I had a lovely hour-and-a-half session with a group of 12 incredibly talented young musicians. I'm guessing we got one or two of your offspring, and a few parents, I think, up in the room. And it was a real joy. I mean, I do this in quite a few schools, and it was remarkable. An hour and a half is a long time to be talking about harmony and improvisation and those things. And the attention and the talent and the sort of everybody joining in was just so joyous today. It went by in what seemed like 5 minutes for me, probably about 3 days for them. But it was really lovely. And two very brave souls who have never improvised in public before have agreed to come and join me at the piano. Would that be something you would be interested in witnessing? Yes. Do we have a bit more? Yes. That's better, okay. So we've got James and Oliver who are going to come and play. We covered two areas today. We covered a bit of modal harmony and we covered a bit of blues harmony. And we're going to give you an example of both, but we're going to try and do it in one seamless piece with a bit of furniture swapping halfway through or jumping on and jumping off. But anyway, we haven't got a title for this, have we? So I guess we should call it... I'm not sure this rings true looking around at the incredible facilities here, but I guess we should call this the Loughborough Grammar Blues. Yeah, right. Okay, what have you got to have the blues about? Anyway, so James Oliver, if you want to come and stand up here, give him a round of applause, folks. So here we go, Loughborough Grammar Blues. We're going to start with James. Take it. See, we're going to start with some modals, then we're going to move on to you. All right. I'll do the pedalling, son. It's not dual control. Okay. 1, 2. time improvising in public. James Donovan, one more time, folks. Well done, guys. Thank you so much. That's enough of my show. Brilliant, guys. Thanks so much for having the courage and the musicality to do that. That was such a... I will go home buzzing from that. Thank you very much, both of you. Just before we come to your request that I promised, to do something a little more gentle, because it's been a bit blood and thunder so far. I'll take you back to my very first gig when I was 15 years old. Well, I shouldn't really have been doing this gig because it was in a pub. It was against the law of the land. But I had coerced a friendly, if somewhat gullible, landlord at a pub in West London, in Paddington, to let me play his piano for a night. I really don't know what I was thinking because I knew about 6 songs. So how I envisaged the evening progressing, I don't remember. What I do remember is walking into this boozer. There was a clapped out old Joanna in the corner. And I sat down, before I played a note, this old fella wanders over to me and says, "Do you take requests, son?" 6 songs on it. But with all the blithe confidence of a 15-year-old, I said, "Sure." But the real miracle, folks, was he hit on one of the 6 that I knew. So somebody was looking out for me that night, I think. And I was thinking about this. I've been thinking about this a bit recently. This must be my most requested song, the one I'm going to play for you now. I've played it, certainly been requested hundreds, possibly even more than 1,000 times. You might imagine, if you play a song that often, its allure might start to fade a little bit, you might get a bit fed up. I promise you, it's not the case with this tune. Every time I play it, I enjoy it and seem to find something new in it. And you'll all know it, there's no mystery to it. It's been covered by just about everyone in the business. Frank Sinatra back in the day, Ella Fitzgerald, and then sort of more modern, Eva Cassidy, even our own dear Andrew Lloyd Webber. Got his talons into it at one point, I think. But when I tell you that the original, I think, is still the best version. When I tell you it's Judy Garland from The Wizard of Oz, of course, there'll be no prizes for guessing. The song is Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And seeing as how it is my most requested song, I think, of all time, by the law of averages, it must be the favourite of at least 1 or 2 of you out there. But anyway, this is my version. I hope you like it. Thank you very much, folks. Well, just before we come to a few of your requests to finish up with, I just want to say huge thanks both to David Halford and Coach House for organising today and inviting me here, to the staff, Melanie, who's organised and trained all the young musicians so well. Congratulations on what you've done, and Nikki for looking after me so well today. Thank you, folks. Can we have a round of applause for my lovely... So this is how it works now. We've got a few minutes, just a couple of minutes left. At this juncture, you can genuinely ask me for anything. You can ask me for nursery rhymes, you can ask me for hymn tunes, jazz, blues, rock and roll, film music, classical music, pop music. Although I have to say, I really stopped listening to pop music after the 90s. So if you're really set on hearing some Ariana Grande or some Taylor Swift, you're not going to hear it from me, I'm afraid. I'm so sorry, but almost anything else. But here's the kicker. You can put a style on it. So you could say, for example, could you play Coronation Street, but could you make it sound like a tango? Or could you play Stars and Stripes and make it sound like Rachmaninoff? You get the idea. You can put a style on, or you can just ask for a favourite tune. And we'll do half a dozen and see how we go over improvised medley for you. So do we have any requests to end the night with, folks? No? Okay, thank you very much. Good night. But don't have to put your hand up. Don't be shy.
Green sleeves in the style of Dave Brubeck.
Green sleeves in the style of Dave Brubeck. There's always one, folks, isn't there? Green sleeves. Security, he's about halfway up on the right. Green sleeves, Brubeck, that's lovely, I'm just kidding. Okay. Yep, you've got a hand up there?
Time in the style of Bucks View.
Oh, it's always... We've got organ scholars in the house and you're asking me to improvise a Bach fugue, which is so far above my skill set and so easy for them. Okay, summertime, yes, we'll do fugal. You know, that's a wide net, isn't it? Yeah. Elements of fugue. Okay, summertime, fugal, okay, yeah. So yes? Oh, here we go. Oh dear.
If you like hymns,
Yes.
all people that on earth do dwell.
I know that, thank goodness.
Yep, thought you might. Style of Elton John.
My father has passed away, but the vicar will be spinning in his grave at that request. All people in Elton John style. That's such a funny request, if only you knew why. Okay, yeah, lady in the middle.
Would you like to do Goldeneye and then turn it into Mary Poppins?
Oh, golden. Just thinking which
Or
one.
James Bond?
Yeah, James Bond theme. I can think. I do a James Bond theme going into. I'm just trying to think what other ones. Skyfall or Thunderball or Live and Let Die. Any of those, or For Your Eyes Only. That was a poster I had on my wall with Darling Sheila when I was a nipper. You're really giving my age away there. Okay, so James Bond morphing into Mary Poppins. Did you say? Surreal but nice. Okay. Mary Poppins. Okay. A couple more maybe we can squeeze in over there. Yeah.
September in any style you like, as in Earth, Wind and Fire September. You'll be right.
Okay. I thought you were talking about, no, it's a different song from May to September, isn't it? September, Earth, Wind and Fire. Okay, September. Yeah, one more. Yes.
Rebel Bolero in the style of Stravinsky.
Have you hated all my lessons? And I will get him back at the end of the day. Rebel Bolero, Stravinsky. Okay, I'm going to put a moratorium on that because, quite frankly, I am terrified right now. Okay. Right, let's recode this. So we've got Green Sleeves in the style of Dave Brubeck. Summertime, vaguely fugal. Do you notice how it's getting less fugal every time I mention it? All people that on earth do dwell in the style of dear old Rex Dwight, Elton John. James Bond themes morphing into Mary Poppins. Can't even read my own writing. September, as it comes. Okay. And then we've got Ravel's Bolero in the style of Stravinsky. If you don't enjoy this medley, it's largely your own fault. Green Sleeves Brubeck, Summertime Fugal, All People on Earth Do Dwell, Elton John, James Bond morphing into Mary Poppins, September, and Ravel's Bolero in the style of Stravinsky. Okay, I hope you enjoy this.
say a really big thank you for an absolutely fantastic evening and also a really great workshop this afternoon. So thanks so much for coming. I think everybody enjoyed it. And now it's time for everybody to go home safely and have a nice weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madeline.